Well, I hope it works. Well, no, this is my test. All right. This is third period for fifth period, so you need to do exactly what I tell them to do. All right. You need to have your handout out that is the PowerPoint. The other handout, if we have enough time, we'll get started on it, the one that's on the desk. If we don't get started or we don't get finished today, then we will continue on that handout tomorrow, so don't lose it. But everybody needs their PowerPoint. I do not expect you to have all of your steps memorized yet, so when I ask you to say the steps, I want you to say them by reading them. By this Friday, I expect you to have the steps memorized. Not to be able to write it out on a quiz or a test, but to be able to work these problems. You've got to know what the steps are. So that's what we're going to be looking at. Okay, let's see. We left off with what step? 3? All right, well, we're going to review the others. Okay, step 1. Let's say it together. Write down the set of contrasting traits. Now, yesterday, did I tell you to add something underneath contrasting traits? Okay, no, that's not what I meant. Okay, so I probably didn't tell you. This is what I want you to write on your PowerPoint underneath where it says set of contrasting traits. You need to write, because this is actually one of those essential terms that I told you to know. Now look at your essential terms from your notes. What term do you think the set of contrasting traits is? Starts with well, you're close. It's the other one. Good. You get 20 scholar dollars. It is phenotype. Contrasting traits is what they physically look like. So that's phenotype. So where it says contrasting traits, write, not that, phenotype. So whenever you're doing step 1, you are writing down what the possible phenotypes are. Now there's something else to step 1. Let's read it together. Assign a capital, that's not everybody, let's start over. Assign a capital letter to the dominant trait and a lowercase letter to the recessive trait. Yes, Terrell. Good question, but that's something else. You're writing down the set of contrasting traits. That was step 1. But what you probably didn't realize is that is actually the phenotypes that you are writing down. You're still going to do that when we get to the second step. Okay, but you're just writing them down right now. That's interesting how it's got that covered up now. All right? Because I'm recording. So how do we know what is dominant or recessive? Well, I'm either going to tell you specifically, or you're going to look it up in a book, like your book has a chart with some dominant and recessive traits, or there's going to be enough information in the question that you can figure it out. And we're going to try all of those types. Right now we're just doing the ones that, that's interesting, we're doing the ones that have spelled out for you. I'm telling you which is dominant. So tall is dominant over short. So the capital T refers to an allele for tallness, and a lowercase t refers to an allele for being short. Okay, step 2. Let's say it. Write down the possible genotypes and phenotypes. How many genotypes are possible?
3.
How many? 3. Good. There'll always be 3. The 2 caps, how do we say that verbally? Purebred, dominant. 1 of each, how do we say that verbally? Hybrid. And 2 lowercase, how do we say that verbally? Purebred recessive. So that's the first thing you do. The second thing that you do is you write down what are they going to look like, their phenotypes. So with purebred dominant, what are they going to look like? Tall. What are hybrids going to look like? Tall. Not tall and short, tall. Because remember, what's our definition for a dominant? It's when you have 2 opposing traits, it's the one that expresses itself. So it's going to be tall. And then the only way we ever get short pea plants is when the genotype is purebred recessive. Now hybrids, they're tall. A hybrid has a dominant gene. As long as they have 1 gene for tallness, what are they going to be? Tall. They cannot have a gene for tallness and be short. Yes. Caleb. The parent that's hybrid is tall, but 1/4 of the offspring were short, which tells me their genotype is purebred recessive. You can't have a hybrid short, because short is recessive. It's hidden. The dominant gene takes over, and that's what shows up. And so we write tall and tall for purebred dominant and hybrid, and we write short for the purebred recessive.
So, for if you can't roll your tongue, what if one of your grandparents could roll their tongue, but the other one couldn't, which would make the hybrid?
Okay. If you cannot roll your tongue and one of your parents can, or both of your parents can, what do you know if your parents can roll their tongue?
My parents can't roll their tongue.
Okay, then they're purebred recessive, so the only gene they could give you is not roll the tongue. There's no way they could give you a rolling. Now, with the way that we're going to do this, we're going to do this in a T-chart, which I'll show you when we get to that problem, where we're right, and I just put geno over here and pheno over here. And so that's step 2, is doing our T-chart of possible genophenos. Okay, step 3, let's say it. Fill in the genotypes of the parents on the pedigree chart. And a pedigree chart, when you fill in the parents, remember that the circle is female, and the square is male. It has nothing to do with dominant recessive. Females can be dominant, females can be recessive. Males can be dominant, males can be recessive. It just has to do with what gender, what sex they are.
You have to highlight the third.
As long as you understand it, I don't care what. You have to know everything on that PowerPoint. You have to understand it. Okay? Now, with plants, do we know which one is a male or a female? Technically, with pea plants, every flower has both reproductive organs on it. So really, they're both. So does it matter which parent I put in the square and which parent I put in the circle? No. Not unless I say the pollen was hybrid, or the hybrid pollen. Now I've given you sex if I said pollen, because pollen contains what? Sperm. So, that's what pollen has in it. It's got the sperm of that plant. So what sex would that be? Male, so where would we put it? In the square. In the square. So that's the only time you would have to put it in a certain place. Otherwise, you can put it either. But we're all going to put it in the same place so that you can see how to work this. Okay? So there's our parents. Now, step 4. I think that's the new one that we didn't get done with. Okay? 3 was the new one? All right. With step 4, let's read it together. Fill in the genetic possibilities of the first filial generation on the pedigree chart. Remember, you've got to know this. Hopefully you've been studying your 7A. because the symbol F sub 1 is first filial generation. You've got to know that's what it is, and you got to understand what that means. So now we're going to do the possible genotypes of the kids, the offspring. So I'm going to teach you a method that works all the time for finding the possible genetic combinations. On your chart on this page, I would write some things on it. First thing I would write down, this right here, the first filial generation, the circle, square, square, circle, that is not telling us how many offspring were produced. So write that down. It's not telling us there were 4 offspring. That's not what it's telling us. Because when Mendel did crosses, he got about 1,000 offspring every time he did a cross. Can you imagine having to draw 1,000 squares and circles? That would be very time-consuming and lots of paper. So I told you what it wasn't. Now I want you to write down what it is showing us. This circle, square, square, circle, labeled the first filial generation, is telling us the genetic possibility of the offspring. So it's telling us the genetic possibility of the offspring. Will there always be 4? Yes. Will there always be 4 whenever you study genetics? No. But in 7th grade, we are only going to deal with traits that are produced from 2 alleles. That's it. So when you have 2 alleles and 2 alleles, it always gives us 4 genetic possibilities. When you get into biology, you're going to deal with 4 and 4. Guess how many genetic possibilities? 16. Just think about hair. 12 and 12. 144 genetic possibilities. Okay? So, be glad we're not doing hair.
Like, your parents could literally have, like, brown and black hair, you should get blonde hair.
Correct. Correct. You got that right. That's why hair is complicated. The height of a human is complicated. The skin color of a human is complicated. So we will not be dealing with those kinds of characteristics. Okay?
You're not going to be here for 6 days.
I'll be here tomorrow.
7, 8. Oh, that's what I meant. 7, 8.
I'm leaving today. That's why I'm recording today. Okay? All right, now, if you follow my method that I'm going to give you, then you will always get the 4 genetic possibilities correct. Okay? So here's how you do it. Now remember, this is representing actually just 2 genes. Now remember, where are the genes? On chromosomes. So we're just dealing with what? 2 chromosomes right now. Out of, I don't know how many's in a pea plant, but if it was a human, it'd be 46. I don't know what the pea plant is. But realize, this cell has to make gametes, which is what? That's the process. It's reproductive cells. It's sperm and ova. Which one is this going to make? Ova, okay? And remember, it's by the process, you got it, Kayla, meiosis. So what happens to the chromosome number when meiosis takes place? Oh, no. It goes down by half. It goes from diploid to haploid. So instead of 2 genes being in each ovum, there's going to be what? 1. So in each ovum, there could either be this gene, which is purple for you that are listening, or in the ovum, it could be this gene, which is in yellow. It's going to be either or, but not both. Now, what type of gamete is this person going to, or not person, this plant part going to produce? Sperm. So in the sperm, there's either going to be this gene, which is red, or there's going to be this gene, which is blue. And so the way we get the genetic possibilities is we've got to match up one with one, one with the other. This one with one, this one with the other. So I have it written down here. You take the first gene from the female and the first gene from the male and place it in the first offspring. Now that would be a long saying to say. So here's how I do it. You might want to highlight this. First with first goes first. That's how I say it. First with first goes first. So purple with red goes first. I'm saying the color so the people listening will know because they don't see me pointing. Yes?
For the female and male, how do you tell the difference? Just because it's circle and square?
Yes, that's it. I know it's female when it's a circle.
Will it always be that way?
Always. On Pedigree Charts. Always. All right, let's go to the second one.
What if we have there?
Whoa, guys. It doesn't matter. And it didn't matter here. I could have done all circles. I could have done all squares. I could have done 3. It doesn't matter. Because is this the real offspring? No. Now, on a pedigree chart where they're trying to trace human characteristics of your family, then this would be how many offspring, how many brothers and sisters you have with you. So if there was only 1 child, you'd have 1. If there were 6 children, you'd have 6 here.
2.
Okay, that's on a real, like the pedigree chart that we saw in the notes, where we were tracing color blindness. See, that's what a geneticist would do, trying to trace a trait in your family. Then the pedigree chart's not going to be possible genotypes. It's going to be actually what each person had. But we're doing possible genotypes. All right, to get the second genetic possibility, we take the first with the second, and it goes second. So we take the purple with the blue and put it in the second genetic possibility. So first with first goes first. First with second goes second. That's how I'm going to shorten it. And that's how I ask you to say it. Hopefully you're getting the hang of it now. Now we're done with the purple one. We've done see, this sperm could only unite with that or that one. That's the only choices. But now we have this ovum, which could have been fertilized by this or this.
Do we have to say, like, first, second, and second on the quiz, or do we have to write it all out?
No, you don't have to write any of that out. That's for understanding. And that's for me asking you how you do it. Okay? All right. Third genetic possibility. You take the second gene with the first, and it goes third. So first with first goes first. First with second goes second.
Then just
Second with first goes third. And guess what the fourth is?
Second equals 4.
Second and second goes fourth.
Multiplication. I got a way that you can remember the last 2.
Yeah? Your quiz tomorrow. tomorrow's over the notes, not this. This is next week's. Okay, yeah, whatever works, Olivia. All right, let's say it all together now so we get it. How do we get our 4 genetic possibilities? First with first goes first. First with second goes second. Second with first goes third. Second with second goes fourth. That's it. So you've got 4 genetic possibilities. Now, look at your very first slide. That had information. So technically it's your second slide. Pedigree Charts showed us 2 things. What was the first one listed? That's it. We have just done that. We have written down our possible gene pairings. Right here in step 4, that's when you get that information, the possible gene pairings. Now we have one other thing we have to cover. What's the next thing? No, what's the next thing on the list?
On the average.
The probability, the average of each of those. So that's step 5, right? So let's look at step 5. Okay, let's say it together. Yes. Step 5, let's say it together. Write down the genotypic ratio and the phenotypic ratio. Now, genotypes. We wrote down the possible genotypes and the possible phenotypes in what step?
Step 1, 2, 3, 4.
Look in your notes, too.
Hey, I couldn't say it.
Look in your, yeah, everybody's saying everything. Step 2, okay? How many possible genotypes were there? 3. How do we say them? Purebred dominant, hybrid, purebred recessive. Guess why I put them in that order? That's the order you must write the genotypic ratio in. Purebred dominant to hybrid to purebred recessive. So that's why I gave it to you in that order, because you're actually writing it in the order that you have to write the ratio. So if there's 3 genetic possibilities for genotypes, then how many numbers are going to be in our genotypic ratio? 3 of them. So there has to be a certain order that you write those 3 numbers. And it has to always be purebred dominant first, hybrid in the middle, and purebred recessive at the end. Now this is how we say it. But when we look for it on a piece of paper, when I'm looking for purebred dominant, what am I looking for on a piece of paper? 2 what? 2 capital letters. Excellent. When I'm looking for a hybrid on a piece of paper, yes, 1 of each, a capital and a lowercase. When I'm looking for purebred recessive on paper, 2 lowercase. All right. Now looking again at your possible phenotypes, how many different kinds of phenotypes do we have?
4.
Read them. Where do you have 4? Look at your step 2. Now look at your step 2. 2. What are they? Tall and short. No, well, tall and short. Okay? So it's your set of contrasting traits. There's only 2 of them. One of them is dominant. One of them is recessive. Whichever one is dominant, you write how many of those. Well, what's dominant in this case? Tall. And whatever is recessive, you write second. And what's recessive in this problem? Short. Excellent. So now let's look at how that looks. Yes?
Can short ever be dominant?
No. Well, in some other organism, but God made short recessive in pea plants. Yes?
This is off subject, but when do we go lunch?
Same time.
I was going to ask.
On Wednesday, chapel. All right. Ignore that comment. Okay.
Sorry.
Here's the problem. Show a cross between a tall and a short pea plant. That's what we've been working on. That's the problem. Here's our parents. There's our genetic possibilities. So we are only looking in the first filial generation to get our ratios. We are not looking at the parents. We're only looking at the genetic possibility of the offspring. So what am I looking for first when I'm looking for the genotypic ratio? I'm looking for purebred dominant. Purebred dominant first. Which again, what does it look like on paper? They're all T's. 2 capitals. So, is that 2 caps? So, when you look at the 4 genetic possibilities, you don't find any that have 2 capital T's. So, we put a 0 down, because there aren't any. Now, what has to go in the middle of our ratio? Hybrid. So, what's a hybrid look like on paper? Capital T and a lowercase. So, let's look at them. 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 4 of them. So 4 is our middle number. Okay, because the time's wrong.
Genetic ratio, is it always going to be like that?
That's why you have to memorize the order, because it has to go in that order. Okay? And then the last in a genotypic ratio is what? Purebred recessive. What does it look like on paper? 2 lowercase t's. How many of them do we have in the first filial generation? None. So you put a 0. So if I asked you for this problem, what is the genotypic ratio, you'd write 0, 4, 0. And you put colons between them, because that's how you write ratios. Well, if I asked you for the second filial generation, we'd have to do it, and then we would be answering about the second filial generation. Yes, it'll always be 3 numbers.
No, is it always going to be those numbers?
No. It's always going to be 0, 4. It's always going to be 0, 4, 0, no. But it will always add up to what? 4, because there's 4 genetic possibilities. So if you got 1, 3, 1, you did something wrong, because that adds up to 5. But if you got 1, 2, 1, you probably did it right. Yes? Yeah, we haven't worked a problem yet, but there are going to be sometimes where this has a number in it, not 0, and where that's 0. So it's whatever it works out to be. Now, how many different phenotypes do we have? 2. So guess what? Our phenotypic ratio better only have how many numbers? 2. Dominant first. So we're looking at what? What's dominant in this problem? Tall. All right? So this first genetic possibility, is it tall or short? Tall. Not both. It's tall. Remember? Dominant expresses itself. The recessive is hidden. So this is tall. Second genetic possibility. Tall. Third. Tall. Fourth. Tall. If you've forgotten, go back to your step 2. Go back to step 2. Didn't you write a capital T, lower t, and what did you write on the other side? Tall. Okay? All this is what you have to do to answer questions. Okay. Now, how many short? 0. So our phenotypic ratio is 4, 0. And then from that, you would work genetic problems. And we'd ask you questions about it. And you'll see when we start working this next worksheet. Yes?
So pheno is kind of like tall, short?
Pheno is what physically is expressed in it. Right. Physical characteristic, phenotype. Genotype, what two genes? All right, now get out your handout. Yes, I'm recording. We're not saying goodbye, guys. We're what?
Is it just on a small board that your mouse is pointing?
Yeah, that's because I'm recording. Okay, guys, look at your handout. I know this pedigree chart right here does not match the one you have. If you look at the one you have, you've got circle, square, circle, square. Okay? So it doesn't matter. I'm going to use this, but you can fill it in with the circle, square, circle, square. Okay? All right. Let's read the problem. You read it to yourself as I read it aloud. Show a cross, remember that's genetic cross, one of those definitions you need to know, between an inflated pea pod. Now look what I have after inflated pea pod. Those are actually two capital I's. What would that represent? Not recessive, purebred dominant. Now what I'm looking at was, or what I was looking for was genotype. That's the genotype of one of the parents. I gave it to you. It also tells me what's dominant in this particular problem. Because if it has two capitals, that tells you what? It's dominant. So what is dominant? Inflated peas. And constricted peas. Now what that means, what it really looks like, a pea pod that is inflated is a pea pod that is like, yeah, real big and you can't see any bumps. Okay, so no bumps. It's like it's all blossomed out of here and all pushed out, no bumps. Constricted is when it's in and you can actually see where all the peas are in the pod. You can see the individual bumps of the peas, okay? So that's what we're dealing with. So let's look at your steps, because I'm going to ask you to repeat them and say them every time we do them until it becomes second nature to you. So be looking at your steps. What is step 1, the first part? Say it together. Write down. Good. So reading that problem, what is my set of contrasting traits? Inflated? No, that's genotype. Inflated and constricted. Remember? Guys, you're not thinking. Your set of contrasting traits is phenotype. Phenotype is what it physically looks like. It's going to be words, not genes. So we write down, and I want you to do this right on your chart. Write down inflated, right where I'm doing it, and constricted, and I'm just going to abbreviate, okay? Inflated and constricted. That is my first part of step 1. Now let's read our second part of step 1. Assign a capital letter. Whoa, that's weak. Let's start over, everybody. Assign
The capital letter to the dominant trait and the lowercase letter to the recessive trait.
So which one am I going to assign a capital letter to?
Inflated.
The inflated. So put equals capital I. Says a capital letter. Don't put 2 genes, just 1. So what am I going to put for constricted then? Lowercase I. Lowercase I. Now we have finished step 1. Let's go over to step 2 and let's read it together. Write
Down the
Good. Now this is where I do a T-chart. Geno, pheno. How many genotypes are there? 3. What are they?
Purebred, dominant, hybrid.
Okay. Purebred dominant. How do I write that?
Capital,
2 capital I's. That should be...
Why does it have to be a capital I?
Okay, good question. Why does it have to be a capital I?
I mean, like, why the letter I?
Because I gave it to you.
Well,
I gave you the letter I. Okay. Yes.
If they don't give them a letter, just make up one.
Good question. If they don't give you a letter, you need to use one of our 26 letters. Don't make up a letter. Yes. But quit talking and listen. Do not pick letters where it is difficult to tell the difference between a capital and lowercase. If you pick C's, O's, S, W, P's, not good. L, I can easily make a difference. I can do this and this. So, but don't pick W's. Well, if I can't look at it and tell if it's capital or lowercase, it's wrong. So don't pick. Yes.
Okay, me and a few other students are going to honor choir on Friday.
After class. Because I don't want to waste time on that. Okay, I'll tell you after. All right, now, we haven't finished, guys. Some of you are talking. What's our second genetic possibility? How do we say it? Hybrid. How do I write it? Good. A cap and lowercase. What's our third genetic possibility? 2 lowercase i's. How do I say that? Purebred recessive. Okay. This first genotype, what is it going to look like? Tall? Inflated. Our hybrids, what are they going to look like? Inflated. And our purebred recessives, what are they going to look like? They're going to be constricted. Okay. Okay. Now we have finished steps 1 and 2. Go to step 3. Let's read it together. Fill in. All right, now again, do I tell you which parent is male or which parent is female? No. Do I tell you in the problem? No. So it really wouldn't matter where we put the 2 caps and where we put the 2 lowercase. So which one do you want to do with 2 caps? No. The square? I. So let's do the 2 caps for Dad. So what's Mom going to be? 2 lowercase.
Lowercase i's are awesome. They're better
Okay.
than capital I.
Next step. Let's read it. Next step. Number 4. Fill in.
Genetic possibility of the first feline generation on the Pedigree Charts.
And I usually just shorten that. Fill in the genotypes of the kids. Okay? Just fill in the genotypes of the kids. And these are the possible genotypes. So let's review. First with first goes first. Now, and that's all we have time for. That's all, folks. Hang on to this. Hang on to this until tomorrow. Yeah.